So Bellator's newest signee is none other than Cuban sensation Yoel Romero. We're talking about some really fun matchups at Bellator for him right now. What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
So, Nick, it was a bit of a mystery as to where Yoel Romero was going to land. Everybody was saying that, initially PFL had turned him down, Bellator had turned him down, and it didn't seem like there was a market for his services, seeing as he's in his mid-40s. And I was one of the early ones to kind of call BS on that. Yeah. And I said, not every 40-plus-year-old fighter is created equal. Mm-hmm. Some of them can still compete at the top of the heap and can be very exciting and bring even some new life into certain divisions and certain organizations. And I think Yoel Romero is definitely one of those.
Yeah, he's at the top of that list. So is Anderson Silva. And yeah, you were spot on. Bellator said that they weren't interested in all these other organizations that would have always taken people like Yoel Romero, Anderson Silva, Fabricio Verdum, these types of people. And it's kind of a weird move to see these organizations like turn their nose up at some of these legends who they've always wanted,
right?
But now they're like trying to do like this, like we're too good for that because you're past your prime type thing. It's weird. But Yoel Romero just fought for a title, so
right.
He's clearly still a number one contender. And Bellator, I give them credit where they're trying to grow young fighters that came from Bellator, started with Bellator or other feeder organizations, and trying to get away from, bringing in the UFC's, scraps, if you will.
Right.
I don't really look at it as that, but they're trying to build their own fighters, and I understand that. But Yoel Romero is too good to pass up on. I mean, he's legitimately a number one contender at 185, and now in Bellator, he'll probably be a number one contender at 205 and potentially even heavyweight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Yoel, and I do understand and respect Bellator and the PFL's stance in the fact that they don't want to be seen as the company that's just taking the has-beens and past their prime legends from the UFC and then using them and to build or try to build fighters. And so I agree that that's probably not the long-term strategy for Bellator and PFL to ultimately see the most amount of success.
Yeah.
But that being said, you have to look at each individual fighter.
Right.
When you look at Yoel Romero, you look at some of these other fighters, they're talking about JDS now. He's dropped 4 in a row, all 4 by knockout. And he's substantially younger than Yoel Romero is. But I would venture to say that if I was in charge of an organization and I was looking at those two fighters, I would rather have Yoel Romero on my roster than a JDS, because I truly don't see Yoel as a UFC castaway. I think him and the UFC, they weren't able to get it right and see eye to eye on certain things, and I think that probably had something to do with his release. But make no mistake about it, Yoel Romero going into Bellator is immediately a title challenger at 185, 205, and as you said, even potentially heavyweight, whereas somebody like an Anderson Silva, I don't think would be a real true title threat if he were to go over to Bellator at this moment.
Yeah, right at the beginning. And yeah, Yoel Romero definitely has some shelf life left in him. I think that you're going to see him come in and be a number one contender and be the favorite in a lot of those matches, and he's going to cause a lot of problems for the young guys that Bellator is trying to bring up. But if any of those young fighters can get Yoel Romero in their win column, that's a big notch in their belt. So yeah, you're gonna have a lot of fun matchups that Yoel is able to get into. But when you're thinking about Yoel's career in the UFC, it's kind of like one of those of like Joseph Benavidez, where he's had his title shots. He's not going to get any more. He's over the hill, and he's kind of done everything in the UFC that he can do. In Bellator, it's not the same. He's never had cracks at the Bellator title, so he can shoot for the 185 title. And if it doesn't work, he can move up to 185 or 205, and everybody's going to be like, "Oh, I can't wait to see Yoel at 205. He's probably going to look massive." And so it's just a fresh start, fresh organization. I think he's going to bring a lot of eyes to Bellator because he's such a polarizing figure. People really love him, and he's such a character in the sport. But I think Bellator realized that he was too great of a talent and great of a personality to pass up on, even though they were trying to play that, we're good,
right?
Dust our hands off.
Well, when you think of some of the matchups and you think of what divisions that Yoel can potentially compete in, you think about, and I've said this since the beginning, I think Ryan Bader's move from the UFC to Bellator was the best move out of the UFC to another organization in MMA history.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan Bader was a guy who was really truthfully never going to win the 205 title at the UFC. He goes over to Bellator, he becomes the champ. I think that was a brilliant move by him. So there's a potential fight with Ryan Bader. Then you think about 185, you have Gegard Mousasi as the champion. Who wouldn't want to see Yoel Romero versus Gegard Mousasi? Who wouldn't think that Yoel Romero would have a pretty good shot at winning that fight?
Yeah, no,
that's an incredible fight. That's the striker versus grappler, matchup that everybody loves to see. And then you have the addition of Anthony Rumble Johnson, who just signed with Bellator, and you think about, man, could we actually see a light heavyweight showdown between Rumble and Yoel? So I think that was one of the things that really led Bellator to reconsidering their position on Yoel, was just the fact that there's a ton of Corey Anderson.
Yeah.
There's a ton of great matchups to be had at 185, 205, and as you said, even heavyweight.
Yeah, they can bounce around. And I think a fight that all MMA fans want to see that we didn't know we wanted to see was Yoel Romero versus Anthony Rumble Johnson. That would be awesome. Rumble wants to come back to 205. I think Yoel has a future at 205, and I would love to see that matchup. I think it would do really good numbers for them, and it would definitely, in my opinion, be a number one contenders match for the 205 belt that Nemkov has, right?
Yes, Nemkov beat Bader.
He's a stud. If he can beat either of those guys, you have a real potential star on your hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with if I'm Scott Coker and I just signed Yoel Romero, I was trying to think of where would I want him to go first? Who would I want him to fight first? And I think, truthfully, we've seen Yoel have trouble making 185 before.
Yeah.
There's been some drama, at the scale and weigh-in day. If I'm Scott Coker, I'm not looking to make a 185 match right out of the gate for Yoel, because the only sensible person to do the 185 match that Bellator has is Mousasi. Just put him straight in there with the champion, and then what do you do if he misses weight by a pound? Then he's not eligible to win the belt, and it just gets to be one of these weird situations. If I'm Scott Coker, I'm looking at realistically how long is it going to be before Rumble can get in there, and then what weight class is Rumble planning on fighting at?
Yeah.
Is he planning on fighting at heavy or light heavy? If he's fighting at light heavy and he can get in there within the next 3 to 4 months, I'm making Yoel versus Rumble straight out of the gate.
Yeah.
If not, I'm looking to make Rumble versus Ryan Bader. I'm sorry, Yoel versus Ryan Bader, because that is an incredible matchup.
Right.
Both very good wrestlers, both big, strong guys, strikers, both in their late 30s, early 40s, that sort of age bracket. I think that either one of those fights, Yoel versus Rumble or Yoel versus Bader, is a huge fight that I would be very interested in watching.
Yeah, and I right now I'm looking at the 205 division to kind of be the place where all these new moves are going to be happening. I think Ryan Bader is clearly the number one contender at 205, but Yoel Romero is now in the talks. He's now, if he gets that fight, he's right there.
Right.
If Rumble gets that fight, and then unfortunately for Ryan Bader, if they sign to fight each other, Rumble and Yoel, that is, then it will slide him back a little bit. Not saying that he's no longer a number one contender, but whoever wins Yoel versus Rumble will likely get a shot at Nemkov before Ryan Bader.
No question, especially given the way in which that fight with Nemkov transpired.
Yeah,
Bader got pretty savagely knocked out.
Yeah.
And so,
That's a stud.
He really is. And then Nemkov is not a walk in the park for anybody to take Ryan Bader out like that. But if Ryan Bader were to get, that's how you get the conversation going again, Bader versus Nemkov too. If he can get in there and make quick work of Yoel, which is way easier said than done, then he's probably back in the conversation. So if I'm Coker, I'm looking to make his first fight at 205.
Yeah.
I want to see him in there with Rumble or Bader.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, with the UFC cutting 60 people, you have to think some of those people are going to be heading to Bellator. Some of them are going to be big bodies in the 205 division, the heavyweight division. And they're going to be people that probably have some names that don't bring the UFC as much draw as they used to. They're over the hill. They're never going to get another title shot. So you're going to see some big names exit the UFC, and they're probably going to come for Bellator. I think Bellator, their game plan of building young fighters and non-UFC fighters is really smart. But with the UFC doing these 60-person cut, I would hold off a little bit on that game plan. You have the rest of history or the rest of the time to do that. But for right now, pick up some of these big names, grab them for what they're worth, let them fight out their career. And us as fight fans, we want to see some of these great fights. Like Rumble Johnson, I would love to see Rumble Johnson JDS. So maybe JDS will make his way over to Bellator. Right. That would be a fun one. Yoel versus Rumble. You know, grab these guys, and it doesn't matter which organization. We just, as MMA fans, want to see these fights take place.
Absolutely. And you have to, I think you really have to go on an individual by individual basis. Yeah. When you look at this 60-person cut that the UFC does, or however many people it ends up being, they just need to look at the situation and say, okay, here's the 60 or here's the 58 people that were cut by the UFC. Do we want person A?
Yeah.
No. Do we want person B? Yes. And I think that if you do it sensibly, you won't be seen as the company that's picking up the UFC scraps, but you're picking up good free agents who you think could bring value to your organization, at the same time building your up-and-comers. Because you have these up-and-comers like Aaron Pico, James Gallagher, these guys that have just been brought up from Bellator since very early days. And we've seen both of them suffer some pretty devastating losses.
Right.
And so when you have all of this momentum behind an Aaron Pico or behind a James Gallagher, and then they just get brutally knocked out, it takes a lot of wind out of the sails. But if you kind of counterbalance that with, okay, we have some young studs that we have coming up, and we think some of them will be champions, and for all intents and purposes, some of them probably will be. But we also have people with name recognition.
Yeah.
And then once these guys, not that Aaron Pico is going to fight Yoel Romero, but, if a 155 or a 145er came over from the UFC that had the same clout level, let's just say like a Dustin Poirier, for example, came over at some point, and then Aaron gets to the point where he can challenge him, then that makes sense to bring somebody like him over because, you think you've got the ability to have to continue to build your star off of a guy who's a UFC legend and possibly potential Hall of Famer.
Yeah, well, for sure. I think Dustin Poirier is a great example.
And not that Dustin's being cut by he's got a big fight coming up. So I'm just using him as an example. I was thinking of somebody who was around Pico's size.
Well, and if you're talking about building fighters, no better way to do that than build a great card, and you put great big names on cards where your younger talent is, and you can showcase your young talent on the same night or even in the cage with a legend.
Right.
And people are going to tune in to watch the legend. And then if your young star is able to put on a great performance, win, lose, or draw, their stock's going to go up and people are going to remember their name.
No better way to build name recognition for somebody that you're building than to put him on the undercard of Yoel Romero versus Anthony Rumble Johnson.
Right. And
every fight fan, I don't care if you're a UFC diehard, if Bellator, it doesn't matter what organization, if it's a local Houston promotion, is putting on Rumble Johnson versus Yoel Romero, everybody's trying to figure out how they can tune into that show.
Without a doubt. And I think that's absolutely the fight they're trying to target and trying to figure out how to make it. I hope it happens sooner than later. I don't want to see it happen in the summer. Let's get these guys in there as quickly as possible. We've all been waiting for Rumble, and it seems like we need a little bit more Yoel Romero in our lives, and it'll be really cool to see him in Bellator.
Just quickly, let's just play. Let's just assume here for a minute we're the matchmakers. We're making Rumble versus Yoel Romero at 205 in March. How does that fight play out?
I think people will be surprised at Rumble's return. I think he's going to look really good. I think he wouldn't come out of retirement and make another run if he didn't feel confident in his skills. So I do think ring rust might play a little bit of a role, but not a role that's going to last the entire fight. I think maybe he's going to have a tough first round if he fights somebody like Yoel Romero. I don't think Yoel's going to have any ring rust because he's still been pretty active all this time. It's really hard to say because Yoel, he kind of laid an egg in his last fight with Izzy.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, like, what's he going to do next time? But he's so unpredictable. It's just hard to say. And I think if he goes to 205, it's going to be a tough night for Rumble Johnson because he's going to be a little bit smaller, very athletic, very fast. If I'm calling super early predictions, and I'll have to, this will probably change, but I think I would go with Yoel Romero to come out on fire and try to get the night done early.
Yeah, Rumble, he's had problems with wrestlers in the past.
Yeah.
That's been sort of his kryptonite, that if you can get your hands around him and get him to the ground, especially if you do it and, after he's already kind of gone through that initial onslaught that he always comes in with, and he's a little bit tired and you can get him to the ground and you can exhaust him a bit, then you can probably beat him. And Yoel certainly has the skill set to do that.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, Yoel doesn't like to use his wrestling very often. He likes to stand and bang. But I think it would really come down to Yoel. What Yoel is going to show up? Is he going to show up and, put the wrestling on
Probably not.
Rumble? Most likely not. If he does, I think he could probably win that fight. But if he's willing to stand and bang, then literally anything could happen.
Anything can happen. Fight. Yoel's very hard to knock out,
and so is Rumble. And both of them are very. They're both very good at knocking other people out, and they're both very difficult to knock out. So this is going to be, if they make this fight, an incredible fireworks
that
matchup.
Has fight of the night written all over it.
No question.
I don't know what Scott Coker's bonus type of situation is. I don't know if it's $50K like Dana, but I think those guys will be walking home with the fight of the night award.
I think so for sure.
Yeah.
Guys, what do you think about Yoel Romero signing with Bellator? I think he's still got a lot of life left in him, and let us know in the comments who you want to see him fight. Yep. Is it Bader? Is it Rumble? You want to see him take on Mousasi at 185?
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out on audio where you listen to podcasts.
See you in the next one.
Have a great day.
Peace.